In this video I'm looking at the Faith Church logo, and we're going to address this based on rules of flexibility for logo design. The logos are different than other graphics because they have to stick to very strict rules of flexibility because they have to be printed on billboards, websites, letterhead, embroidered in cloth, so they have to maintain a certain level of flexibility in order to do that versus something like a concert poster, which is dealt for a single format in a single situation. So we have these 5 different principles that I have to stick to, and each of these inform upon each other, especially the top one here, simplicity. You're going to get elements of that throughout the entire thing because they kind of weave together, they kind of connect in concept. For example, the first thing that we're going to look at this for in terms of simplicity is, does it have complexity to it that might harm its ability to be picked up very, very quickly? Because logos only get a glance, we're basically competing for people's time. It has to maintain a certain level of simplicity, and some elements are working against that, such as texture in here, cluttering it, making it a little bit difficult to understand what the image is there in the middle. We can vaguely get it, but the complexity of it could be brought down to enhance that. Another thing would be the stroke around the edge of these letters, whereas solid letters would perform better. And another element would be the removal of this 3D shadow outside of the stroke. So we're basically moving from black to white to black in this logo, and it happens here, it happens on the cross, it happens on the text down here at the bottom as well. Those are all elements that need to be removed and simplified down, and solid text would perform better there. So those are the basic elements of simplicity. The other second element of this, which again relates back, is clarity. When somebody sees it, are they able to pick up on what they're looking at, and also what it represents very quickly. With this one, with the exception of what has already been mentioned in terms of simplicity, it's actually not doing that bad. I can read the text. It represents church. It has common imagery, such as the cross. So I think that picks up fairly quickly. Clarity is not a huge issue for this. It will actually be helped just through the process of dealing with the other elements. When we get into the more technical of these 3, you're also going to see from proportionate. This one is extremely important and always ignored by beginning logo designers. And that is that as a logo scales, a logo has to have the ability to scale out because it's going to be shown very small in some situations. As it scales out, it has to have an equal destructive point, do a kind of explosion-y thing here, destructive point for each element within it. So, for example, as I'm zooming out, the word faith stays present, but the word church disappears more quickly. It becomes difficult to read. So it's an asymmetrical destructive point for this logo. Those have to be equal. They have to evaporate at roughly the same time. It doesn't have to be perfect, but they need to be within the same realm of each other so that if it is shown on a business card, I'm able to pick up the entire thing rather than just a part. So equaling the size of this text would help a lot with that. And also removal of the texture. The pieces of texture that you see would actually be really difficult to print here inside the cross because as it zooms out, as it gets smaller, let's say I do have this embroidered on a polo, that part is not going to come together well at all. In fact, it would probably just come out as solid with a couple of gaps in it. So it wouldn't work well for that situation. The fourth of these, one color. This one is also very important when it comes to flexibility. It's one of the primary ones for flexibility. It means that the entire logo needs to break down to one color. That doesn't mean it has to always be shown in a single color, but that it should break down to a single color so it can be represented over any background necessary. In order to do that for this, everything would have to be made solid, and this stroke around the edges of the type would have to be removed entirely. That's already been mentioned, and again, these play into each other, but to break this down to a single color, the text needs to be solid rather than a stroke around the edges. When it comes to logo design, solids are absolutely always better than strokes. There are occasions where you'll find strokes can be used, but as a general rule, we stick to solids first. The last of these is compact, because any logo, we tend to perceive it by contour first. From the Gestalt theory of visual perception, we see the whole as something other than the parts. So the first thing we do with elements in proximity to each other is recognize them as a whole image, a single image. Because of that, the contour, the outside shape that it's creating, has to be dealt with to create something appealing. With this one, it's a little bit of an awkward contour shape. It's not awful. Everything is in proximity to it. Nothing is floating off. But the shape itself, if you think about it, is a little bit stretched out and a little bit strange. Finding some way to create a more coherent shape from the contour, from the arrangement of these elements, will cause human pattern recognition to resonate a little bit better with this image, and it will keep our attention longer. Logos are a battle for people's attention. You have to take that into account during the design. Otherwise, you will lose out in competition to something else. Those are the 5 that we have that deal with flexibility, but then we also have a 6th principle that deals with something a little bit deeper than that, and that is harmony. The elements within the design need to have harmony to them. They need to feel like they belong in the same design. So looking at this one, a few things that would stand out is the texture does not fit in harmony with the other elements, and we've already decided that needs to be removed anyway. Another thing is that while both of these have curves to them, the curves between faith and church and even the cross are actually a little bit different. Whenever you have curves present within a small logo like this, they need to coalesce with each other, and they need to harmonize with each other, finding ways to make those mesh very closely in the deepness of the curve, in the angle of the curve, can really bring a logo together. Another issue that we have that comes as a result of that 3D element around the back of the cross is it shows a problem with the kerning between the T and the I. So it looks like the cross is further from the I than it is from the H. That creates an issue, makes it feel imbalanced. Another problem that we have is while the stroke is equal around the edges, it does not represent the same way on both words because church is so much smaller. So it actually feels heavier and it feels more dense and difficult to read on the word church. And that comes as a result of a lack of harmony and size, which again goes back to these flexibility issues. Everything kind of comes together. If the problems that I mentioned in flexibility were taken care of, much of the problems in harmony would automatically be solved.